In this video, I'm going to show you how to build offensively strong muscle in just 3 to 5 minutes for a couple of movement patterns per week, which means that by the end of the video, you no longer have to count reps. You don't have to chase volume anymore. You know exactly how to properly stimulate your muscles in order for them to grow and become offensively strong. And this is especially useful if you've been training for the last couple of years or even months, but you kept hitting certain plateaus or facing certain restrictions that kept holding you back. Then this video is for you. Now, first off, if you're new to the channel, I'm Tim, and I help men who are fed up with having physical issues or not seeing the results of their efforts from traditional forms of fitness, and I help them build an athletic, lean, and pain-free body in less than 1.5 hours a week by using extremely precise signaling, which is what we're going to cover today, over 2 physical capacities that are fundamental to how we move. Now, the biggest problem I see most men that I help, and I see it also across the board from men that I speak to, is that they think they have a consistency and effort problem, and that the remedy towards that problem is the assumption that they should do more. They should add in another day of training, should do another set of training, but the uncomfortable truth is that they don't have a consistency problem. They have showed in their training history that there were multiple moments of being consistent, of putting in adequate amount of efforts, but they have not seen the results of it. So if you then put in more, you're simply putting more into a system that is already leaking. And that system is adapted towards the stimulus that it got, which means that the body you currently have with all of the strength and the force production that it currently can do is a reflection of that. So if you can do a couple of push-ups, maybe you can do a couple of pull-ups and dips, but that's it, and you still have certain restrictions, it's a simpler reflection of what you put in. And if you put in that's more of that, you're just increasing what you already got. So how you currently look and how you currently are producing force or you know, all of the things that comprise strength, which is mainly producing force, but all of what you can do now is a simple reflection of what you put in. So your problem shouldn't be, or the answer shouldn't be to add more, it should be to reflect and look at your current system of operation and make sure that you shift gears, because you have a stimulus problem, not a consistency problem. And the number one mechanism that's going to help you realign the system that you're currently working on in order for you to know how to properly stimulate yourself is a simple mechanism that is called mechanostransduction. And if you've been following this channel for a while, or will be following it for a while, you know that I will be hammering on this process a lot, because this is the only mechanism in which the body receives a certain demand signal in order for it to adapt to. So it's the only mechanism that tells us how the body responds towards a stimuli or a load. And that is, outside of a cell, we create tension. So once we are contracting at a certain level, we create tension. Now, what happens at a cellular level is that when that tension, that stress that happens mechanically is not high enough, it doesn't anchor towards certain proteins that are at the surface of a cell, meaning that it just is very peculiar in looking at, hey, is this a high stress that I need to do something with or not? And most of the time, most of the men, they don't stimulate it high enough, so there is not an anchoring point in which these proteins or these structures at the surface level of the cell, they don't anchor in and create or cascade this effect at the cellular level so it comes back stronger. But if we provide a stressor that is high enough, then we anchor towards those proteins at a cellular or at the surface level of a cell so that it can receive this tension that is happening as a signal of, hey guys, we need to do something different here. We need to create new pieces of information all the way in the nuclei so that we come back stronger and be more adapted towards the load that's being given us. So the biggest problem is that most men, they stay on this left side. Most men, they stay in this area of not stimulating growth. And the problem or the hard part around this mechanism is that it works with an all or nothing approach. It means that if we simply train long enough or frequent enough below this threshold, this maximum capacity that we have, or your max capacity, you're not stimulating growth. If you're near or at that threshold, it flips the switch and then it stimulates and has this cascading effect. So here is how we can change that now that you know the exact mechanism that really facilitates growth to happen. And this not only happens for skeletal muscle, it also happens for connective tissue. Like our body from a survival perspective is very prone to be energy sufficient, meaning that we're always in a state of energy that comes in and expanding energy, and we want to make sure that we're very conservative with the energy that goes out, because if we spend too much, you can guess what happens. So it's a very, very intelligent system, but it's a system we need to utilize in order for us to grow and create stronger skeletal muscle. Now, here is the how of this. So we now know what the process of mechanical transduction is. Now, what most men do is that they trigger only a couple of muscle fibers, and therefore not truly working with all of the cells that could potentially be receptive for this process of mechanotransduction and grow, which means in this case that we've got multiple fiber types, and we all know type 1 is the slow twitch endurance. It's an aerobic muscle fiber, so it's reliant on oxygen. But we also have two other fibers, which is a bit more intermediate, which is type 2A, and that is the anaerobic, and that is a bit of working our max or strength and endurance. And this is often recruited when our aerobic muscle fibers are cannot handle the load anymore. And then finally, we've got our highest twitching fibers, which are type 2C, fast twitch, and they only get activated once the load is extremely high. And this is the type of fiber that most men never touch. But even though we have more units of lower muscle fiber types and intermediate muscle fiber types, the size or the actual unit itself of the type 2C fibers are much grander. So it fatigues faster, it's grander, it can produce much more force. Therefore, it can also increase in density and force production in strength if we stimulate it. So if we never stimulate our strongest fibers, we never stimulate our max force output. And that's why we keep plateauing. But if we manage to flip the script, we can actually stimulate our fibers, or all of the fibers that we have. We can see the most amount of results in the least amount of time possible. And that is what we do by flipping the script on how we proceed or provide this mechanical transduction on all fiber types. So in classical approaches, what you can see is that you work 70% of your max rep, for example, and then you build it up until you finally hit a small percentage of stimulating potentially your muscle fibers. But again, if you accumulate this in a time perspective, you see that we only trigger change just a very fractional time in our sessions and efforts. But if we flip the script and we go immediately towards our highest muscle fiber, and we try to stay there for as long as we can, engaging a max or providing a max stimulus at our fibers, we go from all the fibers, so type 2C, all the way down to our aerobic in a very condensed time frame, which means that we stimulate all of our muscle fibers in a very condensed time frame, therefore stimulating the max amount of growth that we can do, that we can induce. And the beautiful part here is that we have much more time for the recovery side of things, which is the anabolic side, one of the most important sides if you've provided a proper stimulus. So what I want you to take away here is that this traditional form of volume approach is very likely to have you not stimulate as much of these type 2C fast twitch fiber types, because you're building up. It takes much more time, it costs much more energy, and you do a lot more volume, which means that the effectiveness is much lower. But if you flip the script and if you immediately engage your type 2C muscle fibers, fast twitch, and then you work down, but always try to keep your max or always trying to keep that stimulation at your max capacity, you can condense your time much more. And we are activating all muscle fiber types. So we're activating all the tissues, skeletal muscle, in order for it to grow and become stronger based on the load it gets in. Now, this is not intended for you to execute with hundreds of exercises. So that's a bit of the trap that I see a lot of modern fitness approaches do, is that you've got hundreds of exercises to target a specific muscle group, and also work with that three set range of 8 to 12 repetitions. But that is just an accumulation of stress on a system that faces often more stressors, like responsibilities, emotional stressors, especially men, financial obligations. If you add in a lot of these stressors on top of a system that is already in a very sympathetic environment, a stress-induced environment, it just creates a backward effect. And this is why I don't like doing hundreds of exercises. This is why I like doing exercises that work large muscle groups, but that also focuses on trying to combine multiple muscle groups all at once, so that we're also in trying to increase or stimulate our brain and nervous system's capacity to coordinate the different moving parts in relation to gravity while producing force, creating as much synergies between the different districts of the body, while simply performing a couple of exercise patterns that focus on primarily the shoulder joint and the hip joint to build raw strength in. So what are those 6 patterns? We got 2 horizontal ones. So with horizontal, I mean a pushing and a pulling horizontal movement pattern. And for the push, this is a planche push-up. For the pull, this is a front lever row pull or a front lever row. For the vertical push and pull, we've got a handstand push-up, and for the pull, we got a one-arm chin-up. Then for the legs, we got a Nordic curl which primarily works knee flexion and extension. And then we got a one-leg squat elevated, so that we can utilize full range of motion and training the anterior side of the legs in a triple flexed way at the level of the hips, knees, and the ankles. So this means that we're utilizing the different muscle groups that are, the biggest muscle groups that we have, so that we really build this force production, but we also train at a full range of motion. Now, to make sure that we stimulate this, to stimulate our muscle fibers maximally throughout a pattern, what we want to do is we want to flip a repetition on its head. And I'm going to show you here how. So the movement pattern I want to show you in how we're going to recruit all muscle fibers and make sure that we keep stimulating them at our max capacity, so that not only our fast twitch, the highest ones, are recruited, but along the way we also recruit the lower muscle fiber types, which is also important for stimulating all fibers within our muscles that we have. I'm going to show you the one leg squat elevated. So this is a pattern, again, from which works triple flexion, predominantly the front side of the body, but of course there's also a lot of glute activation here. One of the best patterns, I think, in order to build just raw strength in. Now what you can see me do is I start at a full range of motion in my deepest position, which means that I'm creating a lot of dorsiflexion at the level of the ankle, and I'm creating maximal flexion at the level of the knee, and I'm also trying to use maximal hip flexion to make sure that all of the largest muscle groups and also the smaller muscle groups of the legs are being utilized. Now, how to flip a rep on its head. That is what we're going to see here. In this case, I am supporting myself with my arms, and that allows me to find my maximum capacity within the entire movement pattern of standing up and getting down. So I'm going from triple flexion towards triple extension and back to triple flexion. That is the movement pattern. Now, compared to building, doing a couple of repetitions, what I'm actually trying to do here is seeing this entire movement pattern as an entire set, but broken down in a couple of inches. So what you're going to see me do here is I've loaded myself with 60 kg to make sure that I have enough weight on my back and also enough weight on the muscles to produce force and to grow bigger. So I'm progressively overloading in my case, and as you can see, I'm trying to stay as close to that max as I can. So I count in this case sticky points, or points that I feel stuck, because a point of feeling stuck, that is actually where your max capacity is at throughout an entire movement pattern. So I go all in. It's almost like I'm doing 1 rep maxes per inches of the pattern. Then I get out briefly, I catch my breath, I get back in, and then I continue the rep onwards. Only using my arms as only needing it only when I need to, or the support of my arms only when I need to. And then I lower, also releasing the support of my hands, going all the way down, really emphasizing this eccentric load, making sure that I'm activating or increasing the load because I'm stronger on the eccentric portion of the muscle of the movement pattern. And then I go back in, which means that compared to training 3-4 sets, 6 to 12 repetitions, I can only do this movement pattern per leg for 3 to 5 minutes, and often in between 5, with the legs a little bit higher, I would say 5 to 7 repetitions per leg. But my sole purpose here is to find that sticky point, to activate all muscle fibers available, recruit them, and go up while maximizing that stimulus that provides me to grow further and further and further. That's why the load is so high, and that's why I'm also able to that's why I'm also able to only do this for a couple of repetitions per week. Because the beautiful thing here is that once you've activated all muscle fibers, you've stimulated them enough for them to grow, and especially the higher muscle fibers, they have a longer leeway of recovery time, which is also why, for example, if you would do this, you would still be able to walk, because your slower twitch muscle fibers, they recover much faster, which is why you can walk after a leg session, or in my case, I can walk after this leg session. But the higher muscle fibers, the fast twitch muscle fibers, they have a longer period of recovery time because their bundles are just much larger in terms of how much muscle fibers are in a unit and they need to recover from. So this is how we're going to recruit this. This is how we're recruiting all muscle fibers, build a offensively strong muscle in just a couple of movement patterns that primarily focuses on the shoulders and the hips and lower extremity joints in involvement, or the involvement of large muscle groups, and that we only need to train them for 3 to 5 minutes per week of max stimulation. So this is how we can be extremely precise and intentional in how we catabolize our structure, which is of course needed in order for us to become stronger and more adaptive towards a certain demand. And if we then provide it with the adequate amount of recovery, which is more the anabolic side, so adequate amount of sleep, whole and easy to digest pro-metabolic foods, spend more time in a parasympathetic state, we then offer the body the right amount of time to undergo these processes in order for it to come back stronger. So this is the way to become extremely strong, by simply focusing on a couple of movement patterns that work the largest muscle groups at the most at the joints that have possess the most ranges of motion that we have. And we do it by activating all muscle fibers as long as we can during a set by flipping a repetition on its head. And by harnessing this approach, I've seen many clients seeing just impeccable results after just having faced these plateaus or certain restrictions that kept holding them back. You can see here a client who lost a ton of weight. He lost a ton of weight while also packing on a lot of strength and size as a result. Same goes here. Another client who lost a ton of weight over the last year while packing on strength, increasing his capacity. The same here, more density of muscle, more lean muscle tissue with more performance, more output. And the same goes for these two gents, which have been shedding more fat and also building more muscle as a result of becoming simply more stronger, breaking through plateaus, becoming more functionally equipped as well by training a full range of motion and stimulating all of their muscle fibers in an entire set once per week. So if you want to apply to this program, or if you're interested in this program and know or want to break through strength plateaus finally, you can apply for the program in the link below. And if not, you can also watch other elements or videos on the channel if you want to dive deeper into how this system works. See you in the next one.